Hi, welcome to this Refuat Hanefesh monthly live conversation. My name is Dr. Ariel Mintz. I am the Executive Director of Refuat Hanefesh, a nonprofit dedicated to decreasing the stigma surrounding mental illness and providing support to those affected by it. Tonight, we're privileged to have with us Jonny Ritz. He's a businessman, a family man, and an active community member of the Modern Orthodox community in Los Angeles. He has firsthand experience with the difficulties of mental illness with a family member and how to integrate the system with all the complexities of it. Because of that, he started a nonprofit, or what started the nonprofit is actually moving away from that, but Mental Health Care for You, which provides resources to battle mental illness. And he's working to change the state of mental illness that we currently see. I can personally say that I'm proud to call Jonny a friend and a supporter, someone who's been helping Refuat Hanefesh for quite a while. He really, puts his money and his legs where his mouth is, and he really works hard to make change within our community and beyond that. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Jonny Ritz. And Jonny, please tell us kind of a little bit more about who you are and how you got involved in all of this.
Thank you, Dr. Mintz, and thank you very much for having me as a guest on Refuat Hanefesh, an organization that I'm proud to be associated with. I didn't buy into being a mental health advocate, as they say in an old Yiddish expression, a Mensch tracht and Gott lacht. We make plans and God laughs at our plans. I grew up in South Africa, and from the age of 3, my passion and desire was to play golf. I played all the way through high school and was lucky enough to win an athletic scholarship and come to the United States and play golf in college. During that period, the penny dropped and I realized that there was a much greater game called the game of life. So I went back to South Africa and I studied gemology and fine jewelry design for 5 years, always knowing that I wanted to return back to the United States. I came back here in 1990, where I started my career. And it was shortly thereafter that I got the very, very difficult news that my father was terminally ill. I went back to South Africa, and sadly, my father passed away. I came back to the United States, and this was in 1993. At that point, I'd never encountered much with mental health issues, and it was during that difficult period of the loss of my father that my widowed mother called me from South Africa and said, your younger brother's really struggling here on his own. My younger sister was also having issues at that time with mental health issues. And it was at that time that I said to my mother, well, send my younger brother, Laurie, to come here to the US and I'll do whatever I can to help him. And that's basically where everything sort of started for me. Before I actually go forward with this encounter with my brother, I just want to back up a moment, Dr. Mintz, and just tell you, before I came on the show, I was watching your prior interview with Shani Markovitz and Talia Korn. Shani is somebody who a few years ago lost her mother tragically to suicide. So I really, really want to commend her for coming out and speaking about it, because that is what this is all about. It's about breaking down stigma. It's about coming out when people sadly lose a loved one to cancer, to any other form of illness. They are not embarrassed to speak about it. But when it's a suicide, which clearly is an illness, which can be diagnosed like any other illness, people don't want to speak about it. So, Shani, if you're watching, kudos to you. You bring tremendous light to the world. May it be a merit to your mother's soul in heaven, and that she should be looking down and connecting with you. So I was very, very energized by that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that was, definitely a phenomenal live conversation. Shani and Talia are both remarkable people. And that's, part of what we're trying to do here at Refuat Hanefesh. So, we definitely thank them for coming on, and we thank you as well for sharing your story, which you're about to share.
Right. So now we get to the point. My younger brother has arrived on the shores of the United States in '93. He's 20 years old, feeling very, very beaten up at the loss of our father. And it took several years before any kind of mental health issues were noticed. He went and studied, and he then went from a junior college onto the Walter Haas School of Business in Berkeley, where he graduated, and that was towards the latter 90s. It was around that period of time that things really started to ramp up, where he was really, really struggling. And of course, just like any other sibling, my thoughts were, why can't you just get over this? Why can't you just deal with stuff? What's wrong with you? Why are you so naughty? Why are you so bad? Why are you so disruptive?
Which is a very common reaction that a lot of us have when we hear about mental illness.
Right. And Dr. Mintz, when I think back on those times, shame on me. Really shame on me. Because I've come a long way from when I first saw this very, very strange behavioral pattern, and he was struggling, and he was ill, and I didn't realize it at the time.
Sure.
I just want to say to all the folks out there that have loved ones that are struggling with any form of mental illness, whether it's depression, schizophrenia, or if they've been diagnosed bipolar, what that really means, if you speak to 3 psychiatrists, you may get 5 different opinions, but we definitely know that there is something going on over there, and it needs to be attended to and treated. So with my brother, it was just, it was a very, very difficult period. He was flying from Los Angeles. He graduated college. He worked for a year. He lost his job. He was flying to the East Coast. From the East Coast, he flew to Israel. From Israel, back to the East Coast, back to South Africa, where he originated. And things were just all over the place. But he was clearly suffering. And of course, the difficulty of the situation is the patient kind of looks at those closest to them as sort of the perpetrators. I'm like this because of you mom, you dad, you brother and sister. If it wasn't because of you, I'd be fine. And then on the other hand, you look at this poor individual that's really struggling, and you go, if you would just put yourself together. So there's kind of a huge disconnect.
So did that lead to a lot of family fighting, all of that?
Tremendously. I mean, obviously, it creates a lot of stress among siblings, stress between, parent and child. And it was very difficult for us because our mother, being a widow, was still struggling with the trauma of losing a husband. My mother was 53, my father was 55. It was very difficult. Now, Dr. Mintz, you as a psychiatrist are better qualified to answer the question that I'm asked on a daily basis. Well, Johnny, if it's not just a bad behavior and a puberty or something that is just bothering the individual, how do you know that this is sort of a mental illness that can be diagnosed? I don't, but what I can tell our listeners is the brain is no different to the engine of a car. When you're driving in a car, if you go back a little before the digital fancy gadgets, it used to say on the dash, do not exceed 7,000 revs per minute. If you drive that car at 10,000 revs per minute, you're going to blow an engine, at least a water pump, a piston, something. Well, you're not going to get very far once that happens. The brain can only handle a certain capacity. And in the day and age that we live in now, there is so much extra acceleration on the brain, so much extra pressure from a very, very young age. And I've no doubt that people are exceeding that 7,000 reps per minute. I mean, way up above 10, 12,000, and things are popping. And once those, brain cells start popping, my understanding is that things can lay dormant in every brain.
Yeah.
And once they hit that, ceiling of what that person can handle, things start happening, whether it's depression, whether it's schizophrenia, whatever it is.
I'll tell you, I think the big difference in your analogy is that with the car, you take it to the mechanic, they could plug it into their fancy gadgets and they could get a clear diagnosis. With mental illness, unfortunately, we have the signs and symptoms, but we have no specific tests that could tell us if you have that diagnosis. And I think that's what maybe leads to a lot of the stigma and people not even believing in themselves that they have a mental illness because there's no clear way to prove it. It's very subjective in nature. The psychiatrist is telling them you meet all these signs, but we can't give you a lab test. We can't give you an imaging test that says 100% this is what you have.
Right, correct. And the difficulties with the patient is, as you know, with the onset of a mental illness, whether it be psychosis, paranoia, to my knowledge and experience, not as much with anxiety, but particularly with patients that become psychotic, is they sort of disconnect and they lose their insight. And as you know, as a clinician, that you start treating them, and it is kind of trial and error. One has to try certain antipsychotic medications, and the difficulty is that many of these medications have horrific side effects. I don't want to. I want to be very careful when referring to certain medications, because there are certain medications that are appropriate for one patient but not good for another. Yeah. Some of the older medicines like lithium and the drug Haldol work very, very effectively, but a lot of the medications have side effects. And if you're able to stabilize the patient to a point where a little of the insight comes back, and you say to them, you understand that you have a mental illness and you need to stay on your medication, they'll turn around and say, well, why don't you take the stuff? Why don't you stay up at night and see what it does to you? My eyes don't function and it affects my sleep patterns. And it's very, very sad. So I went through this with my brother. For years and years and years, my brother struggled and was subjected to many different antipsychotic drugs.
And as a psychiatrist, that's one of the biggest struggles we have. We know we have some good medications that could help, but the hardest thing for us is getting patients to stay on those medications because they do have side effects. And then when you're not taking them, you often don't have the insight to realize that you need them. So you don't want to be on them. But once you are able to stay on it for a while, then you don't want to stop taking it because you realize how much better you feel.
Right. So, I just also want to take a sidebar here and say this. I know that this talk is focused on, mental health advocacy in the Jewish community. Just want to tell our listeners out there, some of you know me, and for those that don't, I'm a very different Jewish kid. I walk in different shoes. I didn't grow up Orthodox. I didn't grow up with this amazing Band-Aid on my head that you see here. I tell people, this is not my yarmulke, this is my Band-Aid. Because when you've been through a few wars like I have, and you realize that Bank of America and the fancy car and the big house doesn't comfort you, you reach for other things. And this has been an amazing connection for me. I just want to say that about 3,300 years ago, the children of Israel were called to a little mountain called Mount Sinai. And we were given the tremendous responsibility to be a light unto all nations, unto all religions, all people, because we are all created in the image of one God. And unfortunately, people get very mixed up with, well, because I'm Jewish and because you're a Christian, you're Muslim, it affects me differently. I feel the pain of every human being. And although I'm talking on a topic here that affects my community. I want the listeners out there to know I care about all human beings. And if I ever get approached by somebody struggling with mental illness, you don't have to be of the Jewish faith to get my heart. You just have to be a human being. And I'm not interested in your political party, where you live, what you do for work. So I just want to preface that right up front. With my brothers, very, very difficult struggles over many years. And I'm just going to summarize it for you because we don't.
So, Johnny, I think what you're trying to say is that mental illness isn't a Jewish problem. It's a problem for everyone. It affects 40% of people. Everybody knows someone. We're all kind of in this together, and we have to work together in order to defeat it.
Absolutely. And also, I wanted to say to anyone out there, I ask for forgiveness in advance because I don't sugarcoat anything. I say it as it is. And as I was saying to Dr. Mintz before the show, people don't like to hear the truth. You know, the truth sometimes hurts. So I'm not going to go out of my way to embarrass you. To all the clergy out there, whether it's in your synagogue, in your church, in your mosque, wherever it is, stand up and speak about this topic. Confront it. The people out there can only heal and be better people struggling with mental illness if our leaders will be more positive and more proactive about it and speak about it. Let's bring it out in the open. People that struggle with a mental health condition are quickly shoved into a corner, and people make them irrelevant, and people refer to them as crazy, as meshuggahs, as they use the most horrible derogatory terms. You know, I come from an upbringing of where I grew up with tremendous discrimination in South Africa. Here in the United States, sadly, it continues. Well, let me tell you, in the world of mental health, it's worse than I've ever experienced. People.
So, Johnny, tell us what happened with your brother that kind of brought you to where you are now. So you told us about some of the difficulties early on, but when did you decide that you needed to do something about it? When was kind of the tipping point for you?
Well, the tipping point was when my brother was incarcerated, and I couldn't understand why somebody with mental illness would be incarcerated. And when I found out that none of the charges brought on him were felon charges, he didn't, God forbid, murder anybody, armed robbery. He was on the street. He was totally psychotic, and I was reaching out to my community, to the people around me. My rabbi, who I'm very close to, was extremely supportive and often gave me some very, very good advice and ideas. But, you know, he's a rabbi. He's not a clinician. He's not a
Who is that rabbi for people that maybe are looking for a rabbi that's attuned with mental health concerns?
Well, you know, Dr. Mintz, in terms of finding a rabbi who's attuned to mental health, if I were to mention a name here on the air, I think that the poor rabbi's phone would be smoking off the hook. I can only tell you this, that there's an organization in America that is called the Aleph Institute. Many of you know of the Aleph Institute. And here in Los Angeles, Rabbi Boyarsky, if you're talking about a man who's got a heart bigger than his body, this man doesn't sleep. And when he hears about somebody struggling, whether it's in a prison or, you know, the road less traveled, he's there. So I couldn't say enough good about the Aleph Institute. And for all the people out there that are partnered with the Almighty in the bank area, that's a great organization. So if they're not in your checkbook, put them in there immediately, because this particular organization is one that I can only say kudos to. They helped me big time. But back to where things really, really got turbulent with my brother is he was living on the street, totally psychotic, even to the extent where, with tremendous heartbreak, my wife and I had to seek a restraining order to keep him away from our home, from our young kids, because we realized how ill he was. But I reached out to the Federation here in Los Angeles, to Jewish Family Services here in Los Angeles, to many clergy, and all I got in return was Well, we don't deal with mental illness. You know, you'll have to call somebody else. You'll have to reach out somewhere else. It was very, very sad for me. And again, I don't want to make it personal, but I realized that I was on a very, very lonely path here. My brother was incarcerated for up to 6 months in 3 calendar years. And the prison that my brother was incarcerated in, Twin Towers Prison here in downtown Los Angeles, where they keep the hardcore murderers and thugs, my brother was thrown in with those folks. And sadly, it is the largest mental health facility here in Los Angeles County. Shame on our elected officials, shame on Congress. And if President Ronald Reagan um, had any idea how his decisions were going to tragically impact our society today, I don't believe that he would have taken away all the resources from mental health budgets and shut down all the mental health facilities. Because as a result, instead of our mentally ill going into dignified hospitals, they have to be incarcerated with very, very dangerous individuals. So when my brother was in there, I was
Jonny, can I ask what your brother did that led to him being put in
absolutely,
prison?
yeah. Well, as you know, doctor, with psychosis, you're not connecting the dots. So my brother being outside, in freezing cold weather, he didn't understand that, he would he would become very uncomfortable at 3-4 o'clock in the morning. So what he would do is he would scurry around and he would go into the back of people's homes and sleep under the rafters and try to keep warm. And eventually people would call the police. My brother was hungry, so he would go in and steal food.
He would go inside people's homes.
Well, not necessarily homes. He may go into a restaurant. He may go into
Okay.
a convenience store. And he was doing this sort of crying out, I need help, I need help. But as you know, and that's why we're here, is people had no clue how to help him. My phone would ring off the hook. If I tell you the phone calls I got late at night, Jonny, this is Rabbi so-and-so. What are you going to do about your brother? And I would say, Rabbi, respectfully, do you understand what the real interpretation of Lashon Hara is? To really hurt somebody. Because what you're doing right now is you're hurting me. You're not helping me. If this showed up on your doorstep, in your eyes, then why don't you do something? Why don't you go to the Federation or to Jewish Family Services or to any other organization and get help for our people? Why are you calling me up and exacerbating my pain? And we know that the Torah teaches us that that is a very, very dangerous path for them to take. There were times where I asked for people to go and visit my brother when he was incarcerated, and I was told by clergy, sorry, it wouldn't help. He's very disconnected. He wouldn't know that we were there. And I would look at them and say, you kidding me? You know what my brother would feel or know if you're there or you're not there? This illness is no different to any other illness. It's no different to cancer. It's no different to somebody with pneumonia lying in a bed in the hospital. So I encountered a lot of negativity, a lot of locked doors, and to give a little bit of credit, people don't know how to deal with it. It's very complicated. It's very difficult. But as I've always said, comfort and greatness will never be related. They're not a shidduch. When I went to the gym this morning, people are not standing around eating chocolate cake, and drinking milkshakes. They're on those treadmills at an angle. Their legs are burning. That's how you get strong. That's how you get great. Well, to the people out there, if you want to achieve something, whether it's in business, in marriage, raising your kids, it's not always going to be easy. You got to go the road less traveled. You got to go above yourself. And that's what I did for my brother. Because when I saw how my brother was being treated within the community and by people at large who didn't understand what and how to do and help with his mental health issues, I just stayed on track. And I always believed that there would be a solution. And, for all of my dear friends out there that that dress up and look so authentic and so professional, I'm sorry to tell you, some of you are suffering from spiritual anorexia because there's no real connection or belief. All I ever hear is, well, we can't invite him to our Sabbath table because we have young kids. And how do we know that he's on his medication or he's not on his medication? Other people out there are saying, well, we need to keep quiet because our son, who's very mentally disturbed, we don't want the community to know because we've got 4 other kids that need to get married. And if people find out that there's mental health problems in our family, we won't get a shidduch for our kids. We won't be able to marry them off. Where is the unconditional faith in God? Where is all of this learning that goes on? Where's the real connection of believing? Why is it that we read stories in our Holy Torah that tell us when we were chased out of Egypt and we came to the Red Sea, and that when we got to the Red Sea, it was no different then how it is today. People over there were also suffering from spiritual anorexia. Oh, God wants to drown us now. Well, let me tell you, at that point at the Red Sea, there was one individual who said, no, I trust that God will part the waters and will save us. We won't drown. I believe, and I'm not a Torah scholar, I think his name was Nachshon. And that's how I believe every day of my life. I'm always
Johnny,
walking with God.
I hear your point, and I think we do need to have more faith and believe that things will work out. There is definitely a big fear in our community of our children not being able to get married if anyone knows anything about us that's negative. We definitely hide a lot of things in our closet within our community, unfortunately. But, to play devil's advocate, on the other hand, when you're talking about inviting someone to your Shabbos table that might not be stable on medications, if they have, a severe psychotic disorder, how do you protect your kids? I imagine you wouldn't advocate for everyone bringing, let's say, pedophiles into their home and have faith in God. You do have to have some of your own efforts and have some, be careful who you're bringing into your home.
Great question, Doctor. Allow me to respond. In my synagogue, I'm not on the board. I'm not an official in the synagogue, as the rabbi knows that I love to help people. I love to place guests at Sabbath tables, and I take it upon myself. And the first thing that I think about when a stranger walks into our synagogue is I approach them, I speak to them, I do my due diligence. And the first thing I'm looking for is to see if there's something a little off. I ask them where they're from, which community they pray in, and I'll actually do more due diligence, as I said, go way and beyond. And I'll ask a few people in our synagogue, do you know of this, area where this person comes from? And I'll do my due diligence. With
Sure.
That being said, particularly because of what my family have been through, I'm extremely empathetic and sympathetic to these families. But Dr. Mintz, I'm sorry to tell you, society uses this as a weak tool, because what about those that are medicated, that are doing their due diligence and seeing a clinician and going through very, very difficult times? Why is it that society is so cruel? Do your due diligence, make calls, find out how you can speak to people around this individual, bring them into your home, give them an opportunity to heal and to be around your family. If you have young kids, I realize my kids are now 17 and 13. When things were really tumultuous with my brother, they were much, much younger. So I'm very sensitive to that. But I don't think that people are willing to do their due diligence. They just rather pass. I don't want that person at my table. I don't want that person in my environment. Well, if you don't want that person in your environment and you're not willing to go the road less traveled, just be aware when, God forbid, it happens to one of your loved ones.
Sure. And that's a good point. I think a lot of us, it's hard to be in other people's shoes until we've been there, but then it does change our perspective maybe. But not only if we've been there, maybe if we could bring ourselves to interact with people, maybe at first we'll be uncomfortable, but then we'll come to understand them a little more and be able to be a little bit more empathetic.
Absolutely. So with my brother's story, and out of tremendous respect and love for my brother, I always try my best not to embarrass him. But he and I, of recent, have had some wonderful discussion, and I'm very proud of those discussions. But going back to the darker times when my brother was really struggling and he was incarcerated, and we had two presidents that made very, very poor decisions on our behalf. We had President Reagan, who shut down all the mental health facilities, took away all the money. Then we had President Clinton, who signed into law this wonderful HIPAA law because all the movie stars were having their personal records stolen at the hospitals. Well, what about mental health? They just piled it all together. You see, between Reagan and Clinton, it was like, for many years, people are locking up their loved ones and throwing the key in the ocean. So nobody gave it any thought of how you could really help people. What's sad is when a child turns a child, because even 17, and I have a 17-year-old, yes, he's a young man, but he's still a child. From the age of 17, HIPAA law kicks in, and you can't speak to their clinicians. You can't even know where they are if they don't sign a HIPAA release. So my brother was a little older than 17. He was already up into his 30s. And when he was in the jail system, it was very hard because I couldn't get through to anybody. Yeah. But again, I went above myself and I got hold of the voicemail of the psychiatrist in the prison. And you can get hold of the psychiatrist in any prison. You may just get the voicemail. And what I would do is I'd leave her messages. And again, and I was persistent. And I would just tell her a little bit about my brother's history and things that she could do to help him. It eventually got to a point where I was getting no feedback. And I remember one call where I said to the psychiatrist here at Twin Towers, I said, if you're a mother, you should be ashamed of yourself not to call me back and to at least work with me to help my brother. I said, because I have a heartbroken widowed mother thousands of miles away, and she yearns for the well-being of her child. And I said, all you do in that jail is inject and administer zombie drugs so that people walk around there like in a daze, because it makes it easier for your officials to deal with them. Nobody's interested in working with these inmates and using the right medication and the right levels of medication. So I challenge you to do that. And she actually eventually called me, because I've always believed that perseverance is the mother of success. But more than that, as I said, Dr. Mintz, and I know this is sad because most people think maybe this guy's a little off, but the Almighty has never, ever let me down. Never. And I have a resume, and I knew that Hashem would come through for me, because even when my brother was stranded on the street and I had to drive my mother at midnight, who had flown thousands of miles to see her youngest child, as many mothers know out there, a mother's happiness is only dependent on her least unhappy child. And this is her youngest child. And when my mother got back in the car after sitting with my brother in a psychotic state and cried her eyes out, I said, Mom, there are three of us in this conversation, and I give you my word, I don't know when or how, but it will happen. Your son will come back to your life. And that son is SONNSUN. And I can assure you that God feels your pain. And I will tell you that my mother and I reminisce about that night, because back to the psychiatrist in the jail, she finally woke up and called me and said, Mr. Ritz, I am a mother, and I couldn't sleep last night after hearing your voicemail. And I know you've left many voicemails. So to all the people out there, don't give up. Don't give up on your loved one. Don't give up on any human being. We must feel the pain of every human being. That's what the Holy Book teaches us. And that's how I live my life. And she said to me, I'm going to start administering a new drug on your brother that just recently came out in an injectable form. It is, again, I'm not a clinician, but I'm happy to share the information. And I would advise you that before anybody even tries this drug, that you speak to your clinician. But it was called the Invega Sustenna injectable. And she started to administer this injection. It's a very, very costly injection. But don't worry, I'm coming after those drug companies. They're going to meet Jonny Ritz because that $2,000 plus injection is going to be the cheapest drug on the market. We get shortchanged by everybody in the system, all the way from Congress to the drug companies, to this whole broken mental health system. But don't worry, I'm going to be out there fighting for every single one of you. And ever since my brother got put on that drug, thank God.
Jonny, if you're successful, all the doctors out there will be cheering you on. We all wish you the best of luck.
Yeah.
But let me take a step back with you. So obviously there are problems with the criminal court system and how they include people with mental illness. Lately over the last several years, mental health courts have become more popular. And mental health courts are a way to get people, divert them really from the criminal justice system, but take them to a different court system, which will hopefully work a little bit quicker and will get people to the resources they need so that they can avoid being in prison and really get the mental health treatment they need. Is that something that your brother has experienced at all? Do you have any knowledge of that? What's your opinion on that?
Well, doctor, yeah, it's a major problem. I would love to think that we're moving in a more positive direction. Fortunately, I have not had to deal with the mental health court or the criminal courts in the last several years. But when I did have to deal with them in 2015-16, it was horrific. I mean, if the American public only knew how bad the mental health laws are, they wouldn't sleep in their beds tonight. My brother, when he was incarcerated and he had a court hearing at the mental health court or even in the criminal court, if he decided he wasn't going, the way the law is written, they had to give him up to 3 opportunities and then they would pull him out of his cell. But yet when they get him into court, the way that they rule is just so illogical. My brother had 5, the last incarceration, he had 5 misdemeanors against him, which thank God today have all been removed, and they were all very indicative of mental illness. And all I was crying for was to help my brother, and through going through the legal system, I learned about the LPS conservatorship, which is something I encourage you to go and research for your loved ones. By going through the mental health court, you have to petition the courts, and it's not an easy process. But I would hope, with the tragedies that we are seeing around our country, and with mental health being such a huge topic in society today, that the mental health courts are starting to change. And once I was able to achieve an LPS conservatorship for my brother, which meant his rights were removed and that somebody who was in a healthier state of mind could advocate for him and get him the help that he so deserved and so needed. When my brother was standing criminal trial, they wanted to bring in a jury. And of course, being the person that I am, I stood up in the courtroom. The bailiff walked towards me and I looked at the judge. I said, Judge, I said, the real crime in this courtroom is all the officials here that are bringing so much more pain to a sweet man who's sick. He's not a bad person. I said, this is worse than taking someone without legs, pushing him off a wheelchair and telling him to run in front of a jury. Just short of being locked up myself, the judge said, I agree with the brother. Send him to the mental health court. At the mental health court, they found him totally incompetent to stand trial. The ruling was send him back to Twin Towers for up to 6 months of competency training. I mean, a young child would laugh at that. And they're going to teach him how to be competent to go back to the criminal justice system. Well, I only hope that they're working on amending that stupid law. But eventually, in my case, because I was very tenacious, I had to reach out to the ACLU. It was around a time where there was some heavy charges against the sheriff in charge of Twin Towers, Sheriff Lee Barker. And I reached out to the same individual at the ACLU, and I brought to his attention something more severe and cruel than the abuse of the inmates at Twin Towers. I brought to his attention the inhumane and torturous treatment of our mentally ill. And I copied the sheriff and I copied the city attorney and everyone on it. Well, let me tell you, there was diarrhea throughout the entire city, and within 24 hours, my brother was taken out of Twin Towers and moved to an IMD facility in Long Beach. And I just stayed on top of it. For all the folks out there, I don't know if I'm going to encourage you to go the path I did, because this can really destroy your life, destroy your marriage, break your family apart. But I'm sure my family members out there watching or listening, there are no words to tell you how much I love and appreciate the support and the bonding together that I had from my family. I would be 5-6 hours a day in my office dealing with this. But I want to share with the listeners out there some of the more productive steps.
Well, Jonny, before you get to that, I just want to ask, I think it's really amazing what you were able to do. You obviously, as you said, you were quite tenacious. You were, you moved a lot of big rocks in order to get your brother on. I think that's remarkable. And, I know from talking to you how well your brother is doing nowadays. But I can imagine several people that are watching right now are thinking, he has bipolar disorder, he has mental illness, he should be locked up, he should be put in prison. Look what's going on in America. We have all these shootings. And a lot of people blame that on people with mental illness. So, what do you say to them? Because maybe that is a solution. Maybe anyone with any signs of mental illness, we should lock up and we'll be a safer country.
Yeah. Well, who am I to really, comment on some of these tragedies? Because they really are tragedies, Dr. Mintz. But what I will tell you is that we see very, very clearly in recent times, whether it be the 19-year-old Mr. Cruz in Florida that took 17 innocent lives at a high school, or the 28-year-old ex-Marine here in Thousand Oaks, California, that took 12 innocent lives. Clearly, we see that there was underlying mental illness there, whether it was PTSD, whether it was schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, whatever it is. As I said, once that brain exceeds the revs per minute, something goes wrong. And I just want to advocate and fight for better mental health resources, because this doesn't just sort of happen one day. If we neglect and ignore our children, the adolescents' problems that are going on, because unfortunately the brain is getting driven faster and faster and faster in this very materialistic, idealistic type of environment. The kids today, you got to get into Harvard, you got to get into the Ivy League, you got to go to Wall Street, you got to be rich, and it's just too much stress for the kids. So I believe that we need to tackle this from the young ages. And I really feel that over a long period of time, if we start to bring back the resources into the mental health system, and help those that are, our loved ones and society and the children that are struggling, I don't believe that we'll see these kind of tragedies. I mean, you only hear about the major ones. It's happening every single day. So I think it's a dire problem. Dire problem.
Jonny, I just want to quote some statistics. I think this is actually, it's a misnomer that people with mental illness, commit violence. And it does happen. But listen to these statistics. According to the American Psychiatric Association, 3% of violent crimes are committed by people with a serious mental illness. Right? So that means that 97% of the crimes that are committed, violent crimes that are committed, are by people without serious mental illness. Right? 1% of all gun-related homicides happen from people with mental illness. Okay. So, most of the major crimes, mass shootings or homicides are not happening from people with mental illness. In fact, we know that people with mental illness are actually more likely to be victims of abuse and victimization than to be the perpetrators. We also know, I think, what the far bigger issue that we're not focusing on is that each year in the United States, 16,000 people die by homicide. 16,000 people are killed, but 41,000 people die by suicide. So we're talking almost, 3 times as many people are dying by suicide as by homicide with guns. So if, we're really trying to, make smart gun laws and we're targeting people with mental illness, it should be to prevent them from harming themselves, not to prevent them from harming other people, because it's not effective. If we're taking it away from 3% of the people that are committing, the violent crimes, that's not going to change a whole lot. Still 97% of the violent crimes are still going to happen, even if people with mental illness don't have it. But we should be focusing on preventing suicide, which I think is a much bigger issue here.
Yeah. Well, respectfully, that 97%, I'm not gonna comment on, how they arrive at that statistic, but I will say this: that for any human being to kill another human being, to harm another human being, I have to believe that something in their brain chemistry is not right. Even if you want to refer to them as evil, as as just
So most violent crimes happen kind of impulsively and out of passion. And maybe you could argue there's some sort of mental illness there, but then we all have that mental illness. We all get angry and we stop thinking. When your brain gets angry, it takes away the ability of your frontal lobe to make executive decisions. And you no longer could think about the consequences or what's right and what's wrong.
Well, I just feel that if we can get society to view mental illness as an acceptable illness, just like any other illness, and to treat it with dignity, and to put people suffering with mental illness in hospitals and in environments where they can be treated like any other human being, I believe that we will see tremendous reduction in violent crime, despite what the statistics say. I think that if somebody's really struggling, you don't. They're not going to go and knock on a psychiatrist's door and a doctor's door and say, I'm really having these feelings of wanting to kill somebody, of wanting to rob a bank. But if it's same way as like if you're struggling with a bad pneumonia, you go to the doctor. If somebody's struggling with certain feelings that are sort of abnormal to them, that they don't feel safe to approach a psychiatrist, to go to a doctor, it's because of what society thinks of them. It's what their colleagues are going to think of them, what people around are going to think of them. Dr. Mintz, one thing I really want to stress: where is the real faith in God, who gave us the gift of life today? Where is that true faith? People don't have it. I realize that there are people out there that it's all about science, and to those that don't even believe that there's a power above, I feel very, very sad for them. But we have to start believing, because my brother is a testament that against all odds, you can make a huge difference. I just want to fast forward on my brother's story and tell you that, my brother was told by everyone, including some psychiatrists, you'll never get back into the general population. Well, when my brother was moved into a lockdown IND, Institute for Mental Disease, where he couldn't just run out of there, I would go and visit him regularly. And let me tell you all out there, folks, it wasn't the medicine alone and the clinicians. A huge proponent of getting my brother back on his feet was family support, love, acceptance, encouragement. And I realize it's very, very difficult when families have been through so much turmoil. But I want to encourage you, if you have a loved one, first and foremost, before medicine, before clinicians, go out there and get into a support group. There are organizations, wonderful organizations like NAMI, the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, reach out to your local chapter, get into a group, meet with other families that are going through similar difficulties to you, because it is so important for you, the parents, the families, to understand that your loved one is not evil. This isn't happening to them because you beat them as a child. It's because you fed them the wrong food, and it was the colorant in the cakes that you baked. You got to get over that. This is an illness that comes from beyond our understanding. You know, it's just like everybody's predicting why you get this cancer and that cancer. We need to deal with the repercussions, because the repercussions can destroy families. They can destroy way more than the person who's actually suffering with a mental illness. So, folks, a big part of helping your loved ones or anyone close to you, get into a support group, hear other people's stories, listen, corroborate with people, because you just one idea, one situation can really, really help you. Getting my brother through his treatment was so important for our family to understand that Laurie needed the support, the love, the encouragement, and he has blown everyone away with his progress. My brother went through 2 lockdown facilities. Once we got him back out into the general population, having him at the Shabbat table, having him around the community, people were like very, very wary. Obviously, I continued to advocate for him, to reach out and tell people he's stable, he's fine, give him a chance. In our community today, and I'm sure there's people watching, they absolutely adore having my brother at their dinner table. People come up to me in the street all the time. My brother just recently graduated from UCLA. He did an 11-month paralegal diploma. He works for a very prominent attorney in the community. He works over 40 hours a week. My brother still volunteers at Cedar Sinai Medical Center. And when he first came out of his rehab, nobody was willing to give him an opportunity, but an unbelievable human being, Rabbi Jason Weiner, who's the senior chaplain at Cedar Sinai Medical Center, who knows me well. I said, Rabbi, please, we've got to get him something, just a little bit of something. And the hospital eventually went through some stringent protocol, got him 4 hours of volunteering a week. And even now that he is so much more productive and working and studying and even talking about going to law school, he does not give up on his 4 hours a week. He is such a good human being. If you only knew what my brother does, drives elderly people to places, helps them, does things for them. And I want to encourage you to just stay the path. Don't give up on your loved ones. But it's critically important that you reach out to support groups. And as Dr. Mintz said earlier, through all of this, mental health that I didn't buy into, but as the Almighty God handpicked me to be a spokesperson, and I've now come to realize that what my mission in this world is to help people and to push politicians and to push those that can make a difference.
And so, Jonny, we only have a couple minutes left. Share with us what you're doing through your organization in order to make that difference.
Okay, well, Dr. Mintz, as I said to you, mental health care for you, and don't go and Google it because you won't find it. I initially wanted to set it up as a 501c3. In trying to get the funds to start the 501c3, I'm saddened to tell you that people just didn't get it. They couldn't understand what I needed the money for. So I'm now going on a different path, and it's going to be a for-profit platform that I'm looking to create online with incredible resources, not just for the Jewish community, but for every community, for the world at large. I want to create online support groups. I want to get lobbyists to go to DC. I'm looking, anything you can imagine to make the system better is what I'm going to try to do. and it's a steep mountain to climb, but I'm very, very motivated, and I can assure you I will not give up.
Well, that's fantastic, Jonny. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us. I think it was really a true inspiration to hear from you and your story about your brother. I think, a lot of people, when they think about your brother, could really find hope for themselves and for their family. And it really just shows what having family support could do. The research definitely backs up the fact that when your family is behind you, you have a much greater chance of being able to overcome whatever illness or struggles you have. So I definitely commend you for fighting so hard for your brother, and your brother for getting as far as he has. And I hope your brother will continue to kind of be maybe a public figure and a source of inspiration for other people going through this.
Absolutely, and he already is doing that. As I said, I've been engaging in some amazing conversation with him, and he's getting stronger all the time and realizing how important it is to speak out. When my brother was still going through rehab, through all my research, I came across an incredible human being that some of you have heard of, is Dr. Ellen Sachs, who is another famous person who was just pushed aside for many, many years and left on the back ends of horror houses, mental health institutions. She today is a graduate of Yale. She is the head of the law division at USC. And I encouraged my brother to reach out to her, and he did. And we met with her, and we had a cup of coffee. And so, step by step, my brother's getting stronger, and also advocating for others and sharing some positive light on what can be done. If I may, I would just like to, often people ask, Jonny, what can I do? What do I do when somebody comes to me? I want to share just a quick example of what I did when somebody approached me last year. They had a 20-year-old son who was struggling with some psychotic diagnosis, and they didn't understand how to navigate in the legal area. Well, I reached out to a mental health lawyer, and I negotiated a rate with him that he could guide this family down the path to achieve the best situation for this boy who was living on the street. And I want to say that, not to offend any of the mental health lawyers out there, but unfortunately, some of them have a worse addiction than drugs, alcohol, and gambling combined. It's called money. Because when they come across a family who are suffering in this area, they know how vulnerable you are. And boy, oh boy, can they tap into your funds. So I went out and I worked with a couple of really good people in the legal world. I helped them to really put something in place. I also encouraged them to go to the NAMI support group. And I'm very, very encouraged by this individual's outcome, who is now back at university, and he's thriving and doing well. So even you out there, you advocate for your family. There are resources out there. That's why we have Mr. Google. Don't be shy. Google these things, and hopefully with all the turmoil we see in our country, our lawmakers and Congress will be making changes, and there will be more available. And let me assure you that when I find the investor, and I promise you he's coming soon, I'm looking for somebody with a lot of money and a lot of pain, and we're going to make a great business together, because mental health care for you is going to be something that the world can really use.
Fantastic. People have asked how they could get in contact with you. If anyone wants to email info@refuathanefesh.org, we will be happy to forward it on to Jonny, and then he could respond back to you. Our next live conversation will be on December 23rd with Hindi Finman. She will be talking about the pain of an okay day. She's a fantastic speaker, and I encourage you to put that on your calendar. It's December 23rd again. Shortly after that, we'll be announcing our annual creative contest. Don't miss it. It starts January 1st. We're looking for creative pieces, whether that's artwork, poems, essays, songs, whatever you could think of to submit about how we're going to end this mental health stigma and move forward as a community. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope everyone has a great night.